Oh, my God. Okay, my green light is on. Welcome all. We are calling to order the meeting of the Worcester Redevelopment Authority. It's December 18 at 9:07 a.m. And all members of the authority are present. We don't need a roll call vote, I believe. Am I correct? All right.
Yeah, we'll do.
We have to recognize attendance individually.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Do that. I'm Michael Angelini. I'm chair of the Worcester Redevelopment Authority. And starting with you, sir, Mr. Weeks.
Walter Weeks. Yes, Walter Weeks.
Sherry Pitcher.
Nicholas Pepper.
Jackson Restrepo.
Okay. We're all present and reasonably cogent. So, first order of business is the review of the minutes of the prior meeting. They have been distributed. If there are any comments with respect to those minutes, they should be stated now. In the absence of any comment, Chair would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as distributed. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Vote is unanimous. Approved. Thank you very much. The second order of business is turn to you, Mr. Dunn, for capital project update. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Forgive me. I was looking at the minutes. Let me get my papers in front of me here. Second page, yeah. So the first order of business is with respect to the consideration of authorization of an amendment number 2 to the grounds maintenance services agreement with LEI Corporation to increase the scope of services to include the Union Station side plaza area. Mr. Dunn, is there any comment you wish to make regarding this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So the board will remember at the last meeting we voted on an amendment number 1, which was the renewal to continue with them for this year on the same pricing. And then what we realized was when this was put out to bid in 2024, the side plaza was excluded from the scope of services because that area was part of the construction control area of the MBTA Center Platform project, so they were taking care of that snow removal during that season while they were controlling that area. And since that has been completed and turned back over to us, we need to add that area into our contract with LEI. And so that was discovered obviously after the first snow event that we had in early December when it was not taken care of. And the pricing is comparable to what we have with LEI for the rest of the scope of that contract for the other properties owned by WRA.
Good. Thank you. Are there any comments or questions by members of the authority? In the absence of any, is there a motion for this proposed vote?
Yes, so moved.
Motion has been made to approve the vote. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Pitcher. All right, and in the absence of further discussion, do you vote approval? A or nay? What's the vote of the authority? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Thank you very much. The next item of business is the proposed vote with respect to the responsible employer and inclusionary participation policy. Mr. Dunn.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully the board is familiar with this policy. It's been around since all of the board members joined our board. It goes back actually to 2004, and it's been amended several times over the years. And some of the recent amendments include some updates to some of the goals that are included in the policy to make it consistent with where the city has been going with its goals on public construction. So things like participation of minority and women business enterprises, participation of Worcester residents and women and people of color in construction activities. And we had last year had the federal government do their review of our grant-funded procurements and contracts along with the Worcester Regional Transit Administration. And one of the takeaways from that was they said that for federally funded contracts, it's their requirements that need to be included. So they have specific requirements, similar requirements. They refer to it typically as one example, disadvantaged business enterprises versus a separate goal for minority business enterprises and women business enterprises as we have as a city. So what we have in front of you is a brief amendment where at the last section, you can see there are a few exclusions of activities that we have that this policy does not apply to. For example, the cooperation agreement that we do every year between the City of Worcester and the WRA. And so we're looking to add an additional provision to that where contracts funded in whole or in part by the FTA, including but not limited to this state of good repair grant funding that we use, we would not include this policy verbatim in those procurements and in those contracts, because again, in their review, they flag that as being inconsistent with the federal requirements of what those procurements and contracts should look like.
Good. So the only change is to add an additional exclusion.
Correct.
And that exclusion is, the page is not numbered, but that exclusion is contracts funded in whole or in part by the Federal Transit Administration, including but not limited to state of good repair grant funding, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve this change?
So moved.
Second? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
So voted. All right, the next item of business is proposed vote with respect to issuing a request for proposals to lease the restaurant space on the first floor of Union Station known as Luciano's, Unit 109, and the Grand Hall, Unit 110. Mr. Dunn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll give a quick background and overview and then look forward to just hearing from the board if there's any input that the board has on how we're going to structure this request for proposals and solicitation for our next tenancy in the current space occupied by Maxwell Silverman's and Luciano's. And so right now, Luciano's has been there for over 15 years. Some board members might remember the latest amendment, which came before the board a few years ago, where we did a final extension to that lease, which expires this June 30th of 2026. And at the time, we had decided as a board and told Luciano's that it would not be extended further. So we are looking to get this procurement out so that we try to have as smooth of a transition as possible between the remaining 6 months that they have and getting our next operator ready to go to take over, hopefully as quickly as possible following June 30th. And so right now, Luciano's rent is about $11,000 a month, so a little over $120,000 a year. The total kind of space that they occupy includes the Grand Hall. So they operate the Grand Hall, obviously, on a day-to-day basis. If there's no event happening, they don't have like a presence within the Grand Hall, but they have control of it, and that's where they do events like weddings and banquets and so forth. That's about 9,000 square feet, and that's known as Unit 110. And then the restaurant space is about 6,000 square feet, and there's a small exterior space that's kind of attached to it, which is about 225 square feet. And then there's also some storage that they utilize in the basement for particularly to support the event activities at the Grand Hall, like the chairs that they have and tables and all of that. And so one of the things that's good to, I guess, just reference in terms of how that lease has been structured was there was a base rent, and the start of it was, like I said, about 15 years ago or more, and there have been rent increases. So the way that we handle their annual rent increases is through a CPI adjustment, so an inflation adjustment. So that's one thing for consideration. I think we would probably proceed with like a status quo in terms of structuring this next lease similarly with those types of annual increases based on the CPI, but we can certainly discuss a different approach if the board suggests a different approach. But I think that's been helpful for us because, as the board also knows, we utilize tenant revenues to offset operating expenses at the building. And so where we are able to adjust leases by inflation, it hopefully covers, our typical increases in expenses as costs go up for operations of the building over year over year. And so we would definitely want to have some form of escalation, and we would probably, default to the status quo of using CPI, but that would be one thing for discussion. And then one of the things that we would always have in request for proposals would be the evaluation criteria. So some of our basic evaluation criteria tends to be experience. So what is your plan for operations? Have you done this type of use before? Have you either run a restaurant or have you done special events like weddings and banquets before? So we would review their plan and their experience in doing that in the past. We would look at their financial capacity. Obviously, a lot of the space is fairly turnkey, but I would say that the equipment in the restaurant, for example, is not owned by the WRA, it's owned by Luciano, so he may liquidate that. So there would be some costs involved in at least getting this next operator ready to take over the space, as well as just any other upgrades they might see with like furniture, fixtures, and equipment related to the sort of aesthetics of the restaurant. And then one thing that we're considering as we were talking about this with Luciano's over the last few years has just been our belief as a staff and a board that the Grand Hall is really a signature space for us at the station, and we were questioning if it was being utilized to its full potential. As we were, certainly the impact of the pandemic was significant with these types of gatherings and events, but as we got into sort of, somewhat of a post-pandemic era in 23 and 24, our observations was that, there weren't as many events happening. And so one criterion that we're considering is a commitment on a certain number of events. Obviously, it would be, an estimate because a new operator won't have years of experience managing this particular space and understanding the demand for the space or the types of users for different events there. But as part of their plan, we would be looking for estimates of, how many events and the frequency of those events over the course of a year. So that would be something that I think we would evaluate in making a selection. And then also a commitment on the term of the lease. So our, starting point for that would be making sure that any new operator and tenant would have a commitment of at least a 5-year lease, if not a proposal that has a commitment of longer than 5 years. As a board, we might want to prefer 5 years just so that we can, with like maybe options to renew, just to make sure that we can kind of level set and, evaluate, has it been successful over the first 5 years? Do we want to have that mutual agreement to extend for another 5 years? But making sure that someone is not, making a minimum commitment of just kind of saying that they'll be there for 1 or 2 years. I think we want to make sure that we have somebody that's committed to 5 years or more. And I guess that's kind of the overview of how we would typically look at the criteria, and then certainly a minimum bid. And so I think just where we're at, and as we know, there have been a number of expenses increasing at Union Station. I think where Luciano's is at is a fair price for that. So I think we would suggest a minimum bid of $11,000 a month. But we can also certainly talk about that approach as well.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a significant opportunity for us, and we've talked about it before, and I think we need to be very, as I know the entire board believes, we need to be very careful about doing this the right way, right? And as I see it, there's a balance between, there may be a balance between, it may be a conflict between the revenue we get from this and the extent of the use of it. Personally, I think our major interest ought to be in bringing as many people as possible to the facility, even at the expense of perhaps less revenue than an alternative proposal might be. But that's, as I see it, that's a potential conflict. Mm-hmm. I wondered if this vote should be, Peter, should be expanded to include some of the basement space, just so we don't...
Yeah, that's a good point. So I noticed the primary space, and we refer to it specifically in the draft vote, Unit 109 and Unit 110, but I think we should amend it to include basement storage space, because the basement storage space wouldn't technically be considered part of those two units. So I think that would be helpful.
Would be or
because
not?
It's technically not inclusive of those units, so we would want to amend the vote to include
Okay.
basement storage, because that'll be necessary to support the inherent operations of any kind of like events and banquets in the Grand Hall for tables and chairs.
And 110 covers the entire Grand Hall?
Yes, yes. There was also in the lease, this kind of gets into a little bit of the weeds of the lease, but there's a lot of commentary, rules and regulations around common areas and maintaining access. So like even when there is an event, while the Grand Hall is like this unit number is the entirety of the Grand Hall, when there's an event, there needs to be a accessible pathway from the front entrance of Union Station to the commuter rail. So you typically see, if you've been there for an event, you see like them put up like the fencing so that you kind of go around the periphery of the Grand Hall and maintain that. So there's those types of rules and requirements for any kind of operations that happen in the Grand Hall to make sure that the primary purpose of the building as a, commuter rail station it continues to be successful.
And how do you see us resolving the conflict between the use of the Grand Hall for restaurant-associated activities, for example, weddings, and which would be controlled by the successful bidder, and the use of the hall by the public for other events?
Do you want to speak to that? I'm actually not.
We do have in that lease, there's a carve-out for use for like the city or anyone to hold a political event or government-related event, that we get to use that hall for those purposes with advance notice,
City
obviously.
can.
The city can, yeah.
Right, but what about other private users? I mean, I remember years ago, Orville Harold's memorial service was held in the Grand Hall. Had no connection to the restaurant that was there then. Is there an opportunity?
Yeah, I'd have to
for-
go back and look at the exact language, how we worded it, but it was to carve out, to be
Oh,
able to
it'd be
use it.
within the carve-out?
To use it for ourselves and not be run by the restaurateur.
Yeah.
Certain civic events, I think how we have to look it up. But we could expand that if it's not, sufficient now, but that idea was in the lease.
But the restaurant would probably want, I mean, thinking of it, the restaurant would probably want the right to priority use, but, like, would you envision an independent caterer to have access to the space for separately catered events not connected to the restaurant, or would the restaurant, as you foresee it, have the exclusive use of food service in that space?
Yeah, I think it's a good question and something to think through, because I would imagine we would have a more successful bidding process if there were fewer limitations on their exclusive rights, right? So like, I think it would be more attractive when they know they have those exclusive rights versus watering down the value, right? Because I think of even just scheduling, even if it's something that's civic-oriented versus another, private nonprofit or something like that, if it was civic-oriented, sometimes they'll book weddings out a year or two in advance. So if we have something civically that comes up and we want that date, but they've had a wedding on the books for like a year, that could cause some real disruption in terms of the successful operations of an event venue if you're telling somebody that their wedding is going to be canceled because we want to have some sort of civic event there. I think there's language in the lease now that says like, subject to the available date, and so the civic use would have to figure out modifications to what their desired date is to make sure that it's not creating those kinds of disruptions. But generally, the way it has been working is that all other kind of private events are booked through Luciano's and they do all of the food service. I think that operator could certainly consider, having, preference or encouraging them to use them as the food service operator. But if they wanted to bring in like a caterer that they really like, I think that's up to them to negotiate what that looks like. Maybe there's a revenue sharing for the restaurateur, but allowing at least that desired food service to come in and use the space. But I think that would be up to them to kind of negotiate privately, yeah.
I was wondering if it'd be, and I'll shut up in a minute, but I was wondering if it might be useful for us to have, to announce an open session by which we would invite people from the community to come in, have an open discussion about how to optimize the use of the Grand Hall, right? Because there may be people who have ideas that would not occur to us, and we might profit from that, but just a passing thought.
We could
Yeah,
consider that.
I think so too. I think this is a real opportunity for us to sort of rethink what we're doing in that space. And
Right.
maybe it's not a single operator of a restaurant that then has the Grand Hall for events. And I just think it's an opportunity for us, and we should just really just be thoughtful about our next steps.
So thoughts generally from members of the authority? Any comments?
Yes,
Walter?
thank you, Mr. Chair. Just out of curiosity, Peter, do you have a sense as to the interest, the appetite for that space and how attractive it might be?
I think we would have a significant amount of interest if we also make sure that we are advertising it aggressively. Because I think sometimes what happens with, government procurement is that people don't know when they're available or when they're advertised. And so I think that this is a very unique space, unique opportunity. In my observation, I think that in particular, wedding venues are in short supply in the city of Worcester. I think that's been very successful for Luciano's. And when you think of the going rate for some of these event rentals, especially for weddings, when you think of our lease rate being $11,000 a month, you can often rent a venue for $11,000 just for that wedding. So their whole monthly lease could be covered in just having one wedding a month. So I think it is attractive. I don't think the price is too aggressive. And certainly there's a lot of other types of events, not just weddings, that would be successful there. And I think that what we've tried to do, what we've talked about as a board before, as it relates to Luciano's, and then as a staff, is that I think my perspective is that while the Grand Hall is sort of a bread and butter right now for Luciano's, I think, it is still seems to be secondary to the restaurant. They are a restaurateur that does events. I think that as we evaluate proposals and look at experience, I think it might serve us well to look at somebody that is an event operator first, and the kitchen is accessory to the Grand Hall, versus a restaurateur that's trying to get into the event management business. That's kind of my observation.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I also wanted to comment on the advertising piece beyond what's required under procurement laws. Could we have a discussion about perhaps maybe not hiring, but somehow finding a way to promote this nationwide? I mean, this is an incredible space. It's a tremendous opportunity after 15 years. And there may be a lot of operators out there around the country that specialize in this kind of stuff. It's a beautiful space with a lot of options. And if we look around hard enough, there may be some kind of a franchise where this is their bread and butter. And it could be a tremendous opportunity, but it all comes down to the advertising, and it has to go, in my opinion, beyond the advertising requirements when it comes to the procurement process.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We certainly would be able to incur the expenses associated with those types of advertisements. I think we would, get some different input from folks, maybe like Discover Central Mass and
Yeah.
others that might have good recommendations on where those advertisements should be placed. I'm sure there's, trade association type magazines. We could certainly, I think we have a general knowledge of where some of those good locations would be to advertise in the New England market, but I think nationwide, understanding that from some other folks that are in that space, if there's certain like association magazines or trade kind of things like trade publications, I think we could get some advice and feedback from Discover Central Mass on that.
And I also agree about keeping the minimum bid for $11,000 a month, which is what Luciano's is currently paying. We want to make it as attractive as possible for any potential operator. We all know how difficult it is to get a project off the ground. And so I would recommend that we keep it that way, yes.
Rick, any comment? Any other comments by members?
I just have a question. When they have an event in the Grand Hall, they have their own cleaning service that takes care of it, or just our cleaning service? Like, how does that work, that piece?
No, they take care of it.
Okay.
Yep, they, I don't know off the top of my head, I think it's their own staff. I don't think they
Okay.
pay our cleaning company, but
Okay.
I think there's some coordination certainly there.
Okay.
That happens, yeah.
Okay.
One other comment, if I might. I was wondering, Peter, whether or not we could ascertain what other states are doing with some of their union stations. because I believe it was in DC. We went for the trip with, back a while ago, and I know they have like 100 different vendors utilizing the space,
Yeah.
from fast
That's what
food
I'm talking about, like
to,
rethinking.
you know, a
Yeah.
whole level. So I'm just curious, maybe we could take some models or see what's been successful, perhaps consider.
What do you all think about about a listening session? And
I think it's a great
Yeah,
idea,
I think
with a
so.
tour.
What's that?
We do a tour and do
Well,
it.
either a tour, or, my thought was just to get the ideas generally from the
Right.
public, that the more ideas we have about the use of it, the better we'll be able to sift through them and reach a conclusion, I think, and this, certainly, we don't have a monopoly on good ideas.
Right, no, absolutely, I think that's,
do you
I
think,
think
Peter?
that's a great idea.
We can do that. We can do that.
I just think people might want to
Favorable
actually
to
see the
rest of the
space.
authority? Why don't we, we'll have some conversation about it, maybe perhaps discuss it further at the next meeting, but in the meantime, it seems to me we should proceed with this vote, which should get the process underway, begin drafting something, and it'll be a work in process.
So this is, we're voting just to start, I mean,
The vote
we're not
is-
going to issue it.
Right, the vote
Right.
is to authorize the beginning of the process for this to occur.
Okay,
That's fine.
That's the way I read it.
Yeah, I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, that we would, could certainly communicate with the board on hosting this listening session, provide some information about other stations, which we've done some of that research before, and then we could commit to bringing in a draft of the actual RFP to the
Right.
board at its,
Okay.
whenever it's ready, before we actually advertise it, so that the
Right.
board can take a look at the document itself before we
Right.
advertise it.
The vote authorizes the issuance of requests for proposals. It doesn't mandate it. So
okay,
I think what we're doing is getting the process starting. We can
Okay.
have a further, as Peter said, discussion as to what it will be and when it should be issued. But we've got a time frame we have to worry about here.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your view, Peter, as to when we should issue the RFP?
Yesterday.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think it would be helpful if we could try to bring a draft to the board at its next meeting in January for you to look at, and then we can try to also host that listening session, I think, in January
Yeah,
as well.
that makes
Let's do
sense.
that.
I think
It
we
makes
need to
sense.
move
Yep.
pretty quickly, yeah.
All right. Is there any other discussion on this subject? Is there a motion to approve the vote as suggested?
Yes, with the motion to approve with the modification of adding the basement space.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. All right, we now move to status reports.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll go a little out of order. I had put in front of you a communication I received late yesterday from Madison Properties, because at the last board meeting, we had suggested an invitation to them to come in person, and they were not available to do that, and so they have submitted this written update. And since I received it just late yesterday, I provided a hard copy, and we'll have it in the minutes, of course, as well, but that's why you hadn't seen it in advance. And I'll just kind of run through this. I guess also for the record is an email communication from Dennis Dowdell, the principal of Madison Properties, explaining a brief update as it relates to the second residential site. As I've mentioned before, we were aware and have been in communication with the buyer as it's under agreement for sale. He does reference who that buyer is. It's GFI Development and GFI Partners. They have done other work in the city before on the industrial side, and commercial industrial, and they have been recently getting into more residential development as well. So we are familiar with them, and their proposal is for new construction, of course, because it's a piece of land, 197 units. And when we did the master plan and the land disposition agreement with Madison Properties, we had talked about it being not less than 125 units. So this certainly is satisfactory and in excess of that minimum requirement of 197 units is their proposal, as well as some retail. I need to review, they just submitted their plans to to our office for the planning board, which is scheduled for January 7th. The one thing I need to just cross-reference is the square footage of that retail that's proposed in those plans with what we had articulated in the land disposition as well, because while this is a buyer and a new entity and we don't have a contract or a relationship with GFI, we want to make sure that this buyer that Madison is working with is carrying out those commitments. And I did speak with Mr. Trainer briefly. We don't see a need based on the language in the LDA for any kind of like assignment of this, of the obligations of Madison to them, but we want to make sure that if Madison is doing something like this, that the proposal and the buyer is satisfactory with the commitments and the intent of the LDA. So that is the nature, I've kind of like editorialized there a little bit, but that was the nature of his update on residential 2, the second residential site. And he's saying that his understanding, and this is my understanding, is that buyer, GFI, hopes to break ground in early or mid-2026. So that is why they're trying to get through the planning board process in January. And they're also working on financing. They've submitted to me a letter. You might remember this is more on the municipal side of things versus the WRA side of things. But when we did the entire deal structure with Madison Properties, there was a commitment from the city to provide a tax increment exemption on this property, which would enable them to also submit to the state for a tax credit consideration under the Housing Development Incentive Program. We received a letter from GFI just about last week with their intention to work on that. And so we're reviewing that from the local perspective, and their intent is to try to also make that application to the state for the state tax credit piece of it. So we'll be working through that, and I think that as we move forward with that, a city council action will be required associated with that. The second piece of his update is that they are continuing to market the left field building and the lab site. Both the lab and office sectors continue to struggle. An abundance of available second-generation spaces in each sector makes new construction difficult to justify and almost impossible to finance. With much of the quality sublease office space now leased, we expect rents on first-class office space to rise. I tend to agree with that. We have seen a lot of the occupancy stabilized, particularly with the Unum building that created a lot of available office space in downtown, and so hopefully we can see those market conditions continue to improve to justify and support the feasibility of a new office building to be created. And then the third update is he references an attached letter that I've provided from Boylston Properties regarding their efforts to build a hotel in the ballpark district. And so I had mentioned to the board in past meetings that we were aware of this discussion happening between Madison and a partner for the hotel. So he has referenced that partner is and was Boylston Properties. And, I won't read the entire letter verbatim, but it gives kind of a little bit of a background about themselves and their interest in doing a hotel on the hotel site, and their underwriting and evaluation related to feasibility of that hotel being constructed, and some negotiations they had with us from the municipal side of things as well related to the TIF structure that was part of Madison's deal. And that TIF structure was not sufficient for their underwriting to proceed with the hotel. And we had discussions about some proposals, and ultimately we decided that what they were seeking was not something that we were in a position to recommend to the city council. And so they said without that type of significant, change and increase to the TIF structure, they would not be able to move forward. So they're kind of willing to come back to the table if we're able to kind of accommodate closer to what they were looking for. But that's where that stands. They're kind of on pause right now because of their proposal not being something that the city felt like we could accommodate.
Yep. So do you have any reactions to anything stated in this communication?
No, I think it was all my understanding as well where things stood. I think the progress that we're seeing with that buyer on the second residential site is definitely promising. We'd love to see that get under construction in 2026. We have already talked with them on a number of occasions with our staff in the planning division about their proposed design and layout of that building in anticipation of this filing that they just made for the planning board. So I think that they should have a pretty successful planning board process. Like anything, there will be some conditions, I'm sure, in any kind of site plan review, but I think I think they've made, good progress on the design for that building, and hopefully we can see that get under construction.
The building you're talking about is item number one.
Yes, the second residential building, yeah.
So as to item number two, we had the property appraised, we had the left field
Yes.
building site appraised.
Yes.
Right? What do you see as our next step with respect to that? If any?
I think that we can certainly try to identify a buyer independent of their process. We do have open dialogue with Madison Properties as well as the broker on that site, which is locally Keller and Sadowski.
Right.
I don't think that there's any real substantive interest in that right now, but I think we can continue to try to kick the tires and find somebody that's got a proposal that would work, and if we need to play a role in that, as we know through our contractual options under the land disposition agreement, we could consider that. I think the appraisal certainly was a value that's more kind of realistic for what a sale price could be at about 7.1 million versus, I think Madison was sort of signaling to the market that a much higher purchase price would be their desire. And I think that it would be hard to make projects work with a sale price significantly in excess of $7 million.
And on the hotel site, I was at a meeting with the week before last, presented by Sangaban, and the spokesperson at that meeting spoke about the need for additional hotel space in Worcester and the number of people who come frequently to Worcester in connection with Sangaban's business activities, and the number of nights of hotel use in Marlborough occasioned by, insufficient space in Worcester, which is pretty significant. I've forgotten the exact number, but it was a large number. Does that impact in any way, does that thought impact in any way your reaction to the third item regarding hotels?
Yeah, I would agree that I think our market conditions have rebounded significantly since the pandemic. I think much faster than the national average. I think we have very strong metrics right now as it relates to occupancy rates, average daily room rates. I think we certainly do have a shortage of rooms. I think that's been our observation for quite a while, even pre-pandemic, which is why we saw some of the proposals like the one that this board has been working on in Washington Square since 2019. And I think that could only, get more significant if WPI ends up moving forward with their intention to convert one or both of those hotels in Gateway Park, which they've paused for the time being. I guess the one thing that I would say is that there seems to be some declaration in the perspective of Boylston and Madison that the TIF structure that they were proposing is simply necessary because a hotel cannot be constructed in our market without that, and I don't necessarily agree with that statement. One of the things that we don't have visibility into is the overall deal structure of this between Madison and Boylston Properties, and I would say that we have between, as we know, with our partners at First Bristol Corporation with the hotel, they're moving forward. Obviously, it's not under construction yet, but we are optimistic about that one at Washington Square moving forward. There is a TIF that the city had authorized on that. We might need to go to the city council to amend it because the dates are certainly lapsed, but it's a much more modest TIF than what was being suggested here. And then the other one that's very, I guess, encouraging is that the planning board this past summer approved site plan approval for an extended stay hotel off of Route 146 in Worcester on Providence Street. That developer is, I think, working on pulling their building permit as we speak. I think that they're, making very good progress on the financing for that to get under construction in 2026, and there's no TIF at all associated with that project. So I just don't know that I agree that the, level of tax relief that's being requested is, simply necessary for a hotel to be built in our market. I don't agree with that.
So this particular site, the site that's mentioned in the letter from Boylston Properties, I was struck by the language of it, an agreement to acquire, not the site, but a majority and continuing interest in the site, which could mean lots of different things, or nothing. What are our options here? Do we have any options except to sit and wait with respect to that site? That is to say, do we have any control over?
We would sort of control the destiny a little bit as it relates to the urban renewal plan, right? So the urban revitalization plan calls for, and our land disposition calls for a particular use associated with this. So if they came and said that they wanted to do a car wash at that location, that we would have control to say that that's not going to happen there. As it relates to, facilitating the private transaction, I think our options are somewhat limited in that sense. We have sent some other hotel developers, operators to Madison Properties as well to discuss. We don't necessarily, again, have visibility into all the details of those conversations, but they haven't panned out. I think that they got farthest with Boylston Properties, but again, we don't know exactly how that's being arranged. What we do know is that in all cases, Madison Properties has suggested that they would not be totally exiting the site, right? So in terms of their interest. So I think that's, to your point, this reference that Boylston had reached an agreement to acquire the majority and the controlling interest in the site suggests that Madison Properties is part of that ownership structure in a minority interest. And I think that when you're dealing with any other, entity that might be interested in doing it, you're kind of facilitating a marriage, essentially, right? Because it's one thing to identify a site, come to a reasonable price in terms of acquiring that site. It's a different animal to get into a business relationship with somebody long-term. And so there's a lot of different considerations, I'm sure, that go into evaluating that type of a relationship. So that's what we don't necessarily know. And one of the things that could be a little bit of a challenge in terms of like,
Peter, do we have the same options with respect to this site as we had with the left field building site?
No, that's a good question. So in the case of the left field building, because it was so integral to the ballpark itself, being in left field, it almost looks like it's part of the ballpark. And there was a lot of sort of integration and of the infrastructure associated with that. So if you think of the property line, there was a lot that was coordinated between where the infrastructure underground from the ballpark stopped and where the infrastructure for the underground of the left field building began. And so it was critical that they had invested and made, and that's why you see the foundation there, the underground garage there, and the pilings to make sure that that was successful. And also, there was an obligation, so where a lot of these different projects that Madison has proposed, there were targeted occupancy dates, or as they've mentioned, aspirational goals for that. In the case of the left field building, there was an obligation to build the skin, core, and shell of that building by a date certain. Yep. And if they didn't do so, which they haven't, and they've acknowledged their default on that, we have a contractual remedy to force a private sale, so doing the appraisals and forcing a private sale. We do not have that same type of contractual remedy on the hotel site.
So effectively, Madison could sit on the site for a long time without development?
Yes.
Okay.
It is in the urban renewal plan, right? So if,
Can I just jump in?
yeah, please, yeah.
So all of the land south of Madison was owned by Madison, is owned by Madison.
Right.
So it's not part of the Redevelopment Authority's plan in terms of the left field building site was a parcel we conveyed to Madison.
Right.
So it's under all of the controls and restrictions of the urban renewal plan.
Got it.
Everything on the other side was a master planning process that was done jointly with the Red Sox, the city, and Madison. So everyone came up with this idea of here's what we're going to plan to build south of Madison. But he's not, we don't have any control over what he does with that. So, good.
All right. Thoughts or comments from members of the authority?
I have a question, if I may. This is regarding, Peter, this is regarding item number 1, the 197-unit complex. Are you aware of any details or contingencies pertaining to the agreement that they have the quote-unquote agreement. I'm guessing, I'm reading here that they're hoping to break ground in early to mid-2026. I find that a bit too ambitious. I know that they're going to go before the planning board. Are you aware if they're going to need to go before the zoning board of appeals? They also mentioned the HDIP, I believe, and another state subsidy. I'm pretty sure that they have a contingency that until all of these things are approved, they're not going to close on the deal. That's at least 6 months, if not more. So this is a bit too ambitious to even claim that they're hoping to begin construction in the spring or maybe in mid-2026.
Through the chair, yeah, I think summer would be more realistic, and that might be aggressive as well. I do think that they'll definitely have to go to the Conservation Commission, which I think they're filing somewhat concurrently. I don't believe they need to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. The only reason that they may need to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, I'd have to check the parking ratio count on that, but this is in the BG6 zoning district, so there's no off-street parking requirements. So I don't think they'll have to go to the zoning board. It's a by right project that should be just a site plan review. I'm not familiar with I don't have a copy of the purchase and sale agreement, but to your point, it suggests they don't own it yet, and I think that they're looking to get these things in place with their due diligence and their pre-development activities before they take title and then commence construction. I am fairly confident that that due diligence period had already been extended once, just because they've been working on this for quite a few months already, but have now made that significant progress to have that filing before the planning board now. But I would say that, yeah, a summer 2026 is possible, but also aggressive.
Very aggressive.
Nevertheless, this is looking very promising, so hopefully it works out for everybody.
Agreed.
Are there comments from other members of the authority?
I have a
just
question.
oh,
I'm sorry.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you go.
With the building of this hotel, do you think that will help sell the left field building, being there's more, action down there and?
I think it could certainly help, yeah, for sure. Just seeing the momentum continuing, the activity continuing. I think it would be a positive, for sure.
Sherry?
Yeah, I had a question on number 2. Just looking at the last sentence with much quality sublease office space now leased, we expect rents of the first-class office space to rise. Do we have any idea of what the lease rates need to be for this to even make sense? I guess it's more like a reality check, because, yep, they're going up, but if the average lease space right now is 30 and it needs to be 50 to have this make sense financially for someone to come in, I just think we need to have like a reality check on what we're talking about here, because
Yeah.
I feel like these are great words and sentiment, but when you come right down to it, how many years is it going to take for us to get to that point? And construction costs are going up, every month. So what do they need to be, and where are we at?
Yeah, through the chair, I think your numbers are in the right kind of ballpark on
Okay.
that. So a lot of the space that we've seen downtown has been, in that kind of $30 range, triple net, and it would have to be substantially higher to support new construction, but that is also where the TIF comes into play.
Yep.
And why we need to use that tool so often on some of these commercial projects is to kind of make it competitive and comparable to the other options that folks would have. So it kind of comes down to some of those details, for sure. So I think we could probably, get there, but it's going to be reliant on a TIF for sure. I feel confident about that.
Okay.
Are there any other comments from the authority? All right. I guess we wait for further developments, right? You want to cover the other 2 items on the status reports?
Certainly on the MBTA working group and this new task force, not new, that my role on this task force is new with also 990 project. There was a pretty significant meeting last Thursday, and I'm going to share this with our local working group. I haven't yet, and I'll share it with the board in writing so you can get more detail, but I'll describe it to you. It was very promising. One of the things that they were doing at that meeting was having MBTA and Mass DOT provide what's called a rail operations analysis, and it had to do with various sequencing of scheduling and capacity related to the West Station project in Alston, and whether the capacity could be met and their goals could be met with a certain number of tracks. So a lot of the discussion right now with some of the local constituencies there was that they wanted to minimize the amount of track infrastructure and transportation infrastructure in kind of as a trade-off for their goals around more green space, more housing development and all of that. And it seems very clear, and I think that basically the decision is more or less made that there needs to be 4 tracks there. It's because you need it for the Worcester main line and the bypass as well as lay down to make sure that they have enough rail capacity there to get to where they want to be for the Worcester Framingham line as well as some of the other service that goes through that station. And one of the key takeaways that I'll share with you all is they projected by 2030 they would have the ability to get Worcester down to 30-minute headways at Union Station, so the frequency, and potentially as low as 15-minute.
30-minute, what's that?
30-minute headways, so the time between each train that
Yeah.
leaves you, right now it's about an hour.
Right.
They said by 2030, they believe that that would be at 30 minutes and could even be as low as 15 minutes. And one of the key things that I had asked them about, because as we know, there's been a lot of talk about the capital infrastructure investments necessary to get to where we want to be. We have signalization under design that should be done by 2030, but one of the things that has been long talked about is the triple track project. And I had asked them if the triple track project was necessary to get to that outcome, and they said no. They could get to that outcome without the triple track project, which is important because in that same meeting, this was kind of a little bit of the downside, I guess I would say, is they were very clear that the triple track project is not on their radar, short or long term, in terms of the dollars that are necessary to carry that project out because of all of the other critical needs they have across the system and the budget constraints associated with it. As we know, the triple track project, I think it was projected, I don't even want to guess, but it was a substantial investment that would be necessary for the triple track project. So it is, that's a little disappointing, but what's key is that we could get to those headways that we've been seeking and asking for even without that being accomplished. So I'll share some more details. They had like a whole presentation that I have a copy of that I'll share with this board as well as our local working group, because I had not heard that before from DOT and MBTA, that they could accomplish that type of frequency and that limited short-term headway without triple track.
Well, the short-term headway improvement would not affect the time of travel.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So all it says is we'd have more frequently long trains.
Right.
Correct. Correct. Well, I do think that the time is, I'd have to see, I forget if they had an analysis of the time improvements, but we do expect it to get a little faster with the signalization.
Yeah.
The signalization helps because then it
I mean, I
allows
think
trains
this is
to go
bad
faster.
news, right? Because it seems to me what we've discussed before, in order to get cars off the road and to make train travel more attractive, we need faster trains
Yes.
to and from Worcester and Boston. And the delay in the triple track means, don't bother sending me a postcard when it happens.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
Send it to Sherry, she'll be around.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that is, the disappointing aspect is the outlook for triple track. But the other thing I'd ask about, and they're definitely paying attention to this, but we'll have to keep an eye on it, is the investments necessary for the actual coach cars, making sure that that level of frequency is going to require more coach cars. So making sure that they have that in their capital plan to have the trains that they need to accommodate that growth.
Has there been any estimate as to the cost of a triple track?
I think there is one. I can find it, yeah.
There we go.
I think there is a rough
number in the
order of
papers.
magnitude. Yeah, I'll have to find it. Yeah.
Okay. Questions by the authority? I'm sorry to
No,
jump
that's
in.
good.
All right. And Denholm Building.
Related to the Denholm, so we have amendment number 1 completed, at least in terms of the document, and Menkiti Group has signed it. We're just going through, I have to circulate it for our signature, and it'll come to you, Mr. Chairman, probably in the next week or so. But it's done. It's just circulating now for signature.
All right. Okay. That completes your status reports?
Yes, unless there's any questions, happy to answer any
Are
questions.
there any questions? And finally, with respect to financial update reports, you all have those materials. They're in your packet. We all assume that they're reviewed. If anyone has any questions regarding any of them, this is the appropriate time to raise them. And in the absence of any questions, we'll consider them as having been received. Is there any other business, Mr. Dunn, we should consider?
I don't have anything.
By members of the authority, is there anything else to discuss? In the absence of that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
And seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No one opposed? Thank you all. Merry Christmas,
Merry
Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, Happy New
Happy
Year.
New Year.
Thank you.
Bang the gavel there.
Oh, I gotta bang the gavel. Most fun I'm gonna have all day.